Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to begin by detailing the historic private-public partnership effort launched by the Trump administration to combat the coronavirus. As both a businessman and as president, you'll all remember then candidate Donald Trump, now President Donald Trump, being adamant about bringing manufacturing jobs back to America. President Obama and the Democrats had given up on manufacturing with President Obama's erroneously prediction that Trump would need a magic wand in order to bring back American jobs. Not so. The reality is President Trump revived manufacturing in this country.
Not what he said.
He tore up disastrous trade deals that hemorrhaged American jobs, like NAFTA, and like the plan that was in work, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Instead, he put in place better trade deals to bring back American jobs and to bring back American manufacturing. And in the battle
We're in
against
a
the invisible
manufacturing
enemy,
contraction.
President Trump took action to shore up our domestic supply chains in order to deliver the necessary PPE and other medical equipment to the states. Speaker
Down
Pelosi and House
200,000
Democrats are
manufacturing
currently
jobs
promoting
last year.
a $3 trillion liberal wish list among a litany of Democrat
Liberal
priorities
wish list?
immaterial to the
Who's the
coronavirus
witch?
crisis are
Burn
embedded
her
in this.
anyway!
And one would require the president to appoint a, quote, medical supplies response coordinator who would, quote, serve as the point of contact for the healthcare system, supply chain officials, and the states on medical supplies. I'm happy to report this individual already exists. This bill ignores reality because the medical supplies official is in existence. He's been working on this since March to deliver to date over more than 1 billion, I should say, pieces of PPE to countries and hospitals across the country. Since March 29th, Rear Admiral John
Did she just say
Plumchek,
countries
Vice
and
Director
hospitals
for
across the
Logistics for
country?
the Joint Chiefs, has been on the job as the head of FEMA's Supply Chain Stabilization Task Force. This is a historic partnership with the private sector, and under the leadership of President Trump, FEMA directed the greatest mobilization of the private sector since World War II. Rear Admiral Plumchek and FEMA quickly realized the power of the private sector in addressing the coronavirus, recognizing that the 6 largest private sector medical distributors would have the ability to source, procure, manufacture, and deliver as many as 1 billion pieces of PPE in a single week. That is extraordinary volume by our private sector.
Not enough
And at the
N95
direction
masks.
of President Trump, Rear Admiral Plumchek and FEMA were able to harness this power. Every day at 9 a.m., Rear Admiral Plumchek's team huddles with these 6 large private sector medical distributors, and together they review data compiled by Dr. Birx as well as information provided by the CDC to set priorities and ensure sufficient levels of supplies go down not just to the county level, but to the hospital level. After focusing geographically, Rear Admiral Plumchek and his team orients the data to set point-of-care distribution priorities for public hospitals, VA and DoD facilities, private hospitals, nursing homes, acute care clinics, first responders, and labs. In just 2.5 weeks, Rear Admiral Plumchek and his team were able to combine data streams, utilize supply chain visualization tools from DoD, and input data into the cloud. This system is now available to generate reports for governors showing what their state received from the federal government and commercial partners all the way down to the hospital level, as I noted. And thanks to President Trump and his administration, governors now have visibility as to where their supplies are sent and where they're received. And from March 1st through May 10th, this public-private partnership has led to the delivery, and these are extraordinary numbers, of over 113 million N95 respirator masks, nearly 500 million surgical masks, nearly 18
Not enough when you
million
had
face
3.6
shields, and
billion
over 12
N95
billion
masks.
gloves.
Nurses are
That
still
is a
reusing
lot
them
of
for a
PPE,
week.
and we thank our private sector partners for engaging in this effort with us. Also, I just wanted to note that earlier today, the president held an hour-long call with thousands of Hispanic community, business, and faith leaders across the country. He recognized the many contributions of the Hispanic community to our country and addressed important issues like how to reopen their businesses and build the greatest economy in history again. And finally, before I take questions,
not the
I
greatest
just wanted
economy
to
in
note
history.
on a
It wasn't
separate
even close.
note that I wanted to acknowledge the passing of Ravi Zacharias, a renowned Christian apologist who left this world yesterday. Our prayers are with Ravi's family during this time. He meant a lot to a lot of people around this administration. And as my father said, Billy Graham was the great evangelist, and Ravi Zacharias was the great apologist. And we are all thinking about him and holding him close to our hearts and his family today. And with that, I'll take questions. John.
Haley, what does the president believe is illegal
about the Secretary of State of Michigan sending out absentee ballot applications, and what federal funding is he considering withholding from the state of Michigan as a result?
So, I won't get into exactly what the funding considerations are. I would note that his tweets were meant to alert Secretary Mnuchin and Mr. Vogt about, head of OMB, about his concerns with trillions of dollars going to these states, and his noted concerns about a lot of fraud that is potentially at play when you have mass mail-in voting. So with regard to the illegality and legality of it, that's a question for the campaign as to their voting and ballot practices, but I would just note that his tweet was meant to alert OMB. He wanted to be very careful as we send trillions of dollars to states that we keep this important point in mind and we ensure that there's fairness in our voting system and absolute accuracy.
They just mourned the passing of Ravi Zacharias. He claimed he was a doctor. He's an evangelist that claimed he was a doctor. He was not.
Republican states, they're also doing these mail-in applications for ballots, and so I'm confused. What is it that he thinks is illegal that's happening in Michigan? He doesn't really specify.
So first, with regard to the president doing a mail-in vote, the president is, after all, the president, which means he's here in Washington. He's unable to cast his vote down in Florida, his state of residence. So for him, that's why he had to do a mail-in vote. But he supports mail-in voting for a reason. When you have a reason that you are unable to be present,
what's illegal?
Right now, we're very far from November 3rd. I'm glad that you have the prediction tool and you can tell us what will be happening on November 3rd, 2020. I certainly don't, nor does the president.
Primaries coming up, and that's like what's happening in Nevada and whatnot.
I assume you care about fairness
What's illegal?
and accuracy in our elections. Do you not?
No, Kaylee, what's illegal?
There is widespread voter fraud.
Come on, Caitlin.
There's evidence.
Get her with
you
it.
can go look this up on ProPublica. There is a bipartisan consensus on the fact that mass mail-in voting can lead to fraud. There was a 2005 commission by none other than President Carter, who's not a member of the Republican Party,
Any voting
and also
can lead to
James
fraud.
Baker about this, concluding that these ballots, quote, remain the largest source of potential voter fraud. So this is a concern. The president's right to look at this. We want a free and fair election, and that's his concern. Yes, Zeke?
Kaylee, on this subject and one other on a different one, the president deleted his first tweet, which alleged falsely that the state of Michigan was sending out absentee ballots to every voter. In fact, they sent out absentee ballot requests. Was the president misinformed this morning? And why is he only directing this message toward Michigan, not other states like Georgia and others that are sending similar absentee ballot requests to their citizens?
So the president corrected his tweet, as you noted, and with regard
So the president
to
made a mistake.
State by state and
He
looking
made
at
a
ballots
mistake.
and the way they're distributed, that would be a question for the Trump campaign, and I'd refer you to the campaign on that point.
That you used to be in charge of.
Do you have any more details on the timing when the president would like to schedule that here in Washington? And does that mean that travel restrictions that are currently in place on
Sherry, that's awfully demanding,
China,
trying to stay alive.
would potentially be relaxed before that meeting would take place here?
So
Hey,
I
Barbara.
won't get
Hey,
into the
Rich.
mechanics of how that would happen. I would note that the president really wants to see the G7 happen here in Washington as we begin not just to reopen the country, but as the world begins to reopen.
Hey, Nate Rue.
He'd like to see it happen sometime in June, but as to a particular date, I don't have any announcement on that front or to the mechanisms of how we'd make that
Hi,
work.
Bev. Hi, Lynn.
Thanks, Kaylee. Couple of questions for you. One, does President Trump support the CDC guidelines that were released over the weekend? And if so, why were they released so quietly? Why not talk about them, roll them out here from the podium?
That's an
So
excellent
the CDC
question.
guidelines, there was a 60-page document that came out last night that I assume you're referencing. That document, I talked to Dr. Redfield earlier today about it, and much of that was already out there. So Appendixes A, B, C, and D had been out there for a while. Appendix E, he said he thinks got posted sometime late last week. And again, these were his rough estimates he was giving me. Appendix F was being discussed, and there was constructive criticism of it through the task force and the interagency process. So that was refined. And my point in sharing that with you is that the 60-page document was merely an aggregation of a lot of what was already out there. So it's not as if this was new information.
Yeah, there's some
that
question
we were
about that,
announcing,
Marcy.
but it was,
I'm going to look into
more
that.
guidance pursuant to our reopening
Is
of America
Mar-a-Lago a
guidance that was
club
issued,
or a
several
residence?
weeks
According
ago.
to the city, it's a
Support
club.
the guidelines? Does he think Americans should follow those guidelines, or should they be following the initial guidelines that you rolled out here from the podium?
So the president's been very clear. He supports the reopening of
Has
America
he?
guidelines. The CDC guidelines are in concert with those guidelines. He wants to safely reopen this country. It's very important we do so, and it's
And the concert
good
is
to see
Megadeth.
that most states, I think basically all of them, have plans at this point to reopen, and we're starting to see the safe reopening of several states and Americans getting back to work.
Let me just get your reaction to something. We just got moments ago a statement from the American Nurses Association which says, quote, The American Nurses Association has not received reports from nurses or other frontline healthcare workers utilizing hydroxychloroquine as a preventative treatment for COVID-19. Why does the president continue to say that many or thousands of frontline workers are
Thousands
using
and
it as
thousands.
a prophylactic?
Well, there is, at Henry Ford Hospital is doing a study on this now where 3,000 frontline workers will be taking hydroxychloroquine to look at its use as a prophylaxis. I believe there's a few hundred or 190 workers in Tampa General Hospital. So this is being used
190
by
as
some.
part of the
And
study.
one thing I want to note
190
with
is
regard to
thousands and thousands, though, right?
hydroxychloroquine, because I think it's very important that we're as accurate as we can be with our reporting on this. Hydroxychloroquine has been a drug that has been in use for 65 years for lupus, arthritis, and malaria. It has a very good safety profile, but as with any drug and as with any prescription, it should be given by a doctor to a patient
Josh.
in that context. So no
Nah,
one should
nothing
be
going
taking
on.
this without a prescription from their doctor. But that being said, I've seen a lot of apoplectic coverage of hydroxychloroquine. You had Jimmy Kimmel saying the president's
Did she,
quote,
Rich?
trying
I
to
missed
kill
that.
himself by taking it. You had Joe Scarborough saying, quote, this will kill you. Neil Cavuto saying,
Yeah.
what have you got to lose? One thing you have to lose are lives. And you had Chris Cuomo saying the president knows that
yes,
hydroxychloroquine
that is
is
accurate.
not
You do
supported
have
by
a life to
science.
lose.
He knows it has been flagged by his own people, and he's using it. Well, Cuomo mocked the president for this. And interestingly, I found this out just before coming here. Hydroxychloroquine, of course, is an FDA-approved medication with a long proven track record for safety, and it turns out
with
that
some people dying.
Chris Cuomo took a less safe version of it called quinine, which the FDA removed from the market in 2006 because of its serious side effects, including death. So really interesting to
So
have
he
that
took it
criticism
after that?
of the
He took it
president.
after
On that note, to
2006?
Chris Cuomo, I'd like to redirect him to his brother, the governor of New York, Governor Cuomo, who has several on-the-record statements about hydroxychloroquine, saying, I'm an optimist, I'm hopeful about the drug, and that's why we'll try it here in New York as soon as we get it. There has been anecdotal evidence that it's promising, that's why we're going ahead, and I have
Right.
about 8 other quotes from Governor Cuomo.
which has been
should any of you have
disproven.
interest in that.
You just
So-
said there are studies, though. There are trials that are in their early phases. Do you have
Yes.
any evidence that thousands of frontline workers are currently using it because they believe it actually will prevent them from getting
So the
COVID-19?
the FDA has approved this for off-label use. You know, this president's a big believer in right to try legislation. People who are in their last.
Thousands of workers
There are
using
several studies that have been brought that the president has actually mentioned that I'd refer you to. There was one out of France, a French study involving more than 1,000 patients that found that the vast majority had, quote, good clinical outcomes, and by the vast majority, that was more
10%
than
of them
90%.
had
There was
heart
an
racing.
Italian study of more than 65,000 patients that demonstrated only 20 tested positive of those who were taking it prophylactically, and a South Korea study as well. So there are several studies, and if you're someone out there and this is a safe drug to use and your doctor, importantly to underscore that, and your doctor prescribes it for your use as a prophylaxis or after coming into contact with COVID, then it's something you should take if it's prescribed by the doctor and that's your personal medical choice. Yes.
Kaylee, Governor DeSantis just suggested that the president may be going down to Florida for the SpaceX NASA launch next week. Is that accurate?
So we have no news on scheduling at that front, but if I get news in the future, I will certainly provide that for you. Yes, Jack.
Kaylee,
Okay,
how often does
Cuomo
the
wasn't
president
taking
talk
quinine.
to director vote or acting director vote from the OMB?
To who?
To the
Hey, Larry.
acting director of OMB.
Often. He just was in the Oval Office with the president, so they do speak often. I don't have a readout of the president's schedule, but they do speak regularly.
If he wanted to flag to him his concerns about Michigan, why didn't he just tell him instead of sending a tweet?
Because the president believes in unprecedented transparency, and I'm sure you as a journalist are very eager and excited when you learn about the president's decision-making process in real time, whether that's on Twitter or from me here up at the podium.
You just said that was
Yeah.
that was the reasoning for him expressing
I
his
didn't say that was the
concerns?
reasoning, but I'm saying this is a transparent president, and I think that that's something that you should be lauding rather than questioning as to why he decided to tweet.
You know,
this.
the guy who won't give you his
Apart
taxes.
from President Macron, do you have any other answers from G7 leaders that they are definitely willing to come here?
So I won't get into the president's private conversations and correspondences with world leaders, but we do hope to see this happen. We hope
They're
that-
all perfect.
How can you characterize the response as being great, sounds like a good idea, or thinking about it?
So I don't have any information about the response from world leaders, but we certainly hope to see this happen. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Could you clarify, please, President Trump's comments about saying that it was a good idea, it was good that there were so many positive tests for COVID-19, whereas a lot of people look at that and say that this was actually terrible, that we have actually 1/3 of all the cases in the world.
Well, look, I would note this, that the president, what he was saying there is that we are testing. When you have more cases, in order to identify those cases, you have to have tested a high volume of people. So the more you test, the more cases numerically, not necessarily as a percent positive, but numerically, you will see just by volume, sheer volume
is
of your
approved
testing.
for
And the
use in the
president's
United
done an extraordinary
States by
job
the
on this
FDA.
front. Washington Post surveyed
For malaria,
governor's
not for leg
offices and
cramps.
state health departments and found
So-
that at least a dozen states have testing capacity that outstrips the supply of patients. That's a very good job done by our federal government in supporting the states. To cite the governor of New York again, quote, "We have more sites and more testing capacity than we're using." So we're testing a lot, and thus we're finding a number of cases. But as we safely reopen, we do have some encouraging numbers on that front, that we continue to see a week-over-week decline, a 15% decline in deaths in just the last week. April 1st to mid-May, 50% decline in new hospitalization and under 25,000 cases today. So we are seeing progress. Yes.
Kelly,
Wow,
can you tell us
25,000.
what law specifically the president thinks the Secretary of State in Michigan broke by sending out the applications? And
Yes,
did
please.
the Secretary of State in Georgia also break that law by sending out applications for their primary?
Again,
And West
I'd reference you
Virginia.
to the campaign. These are ballot questions, and I reference you to the campaign on
That's
that.
the
the
president.
president
My former
said-
employer, my current employer's
You're the
White House.
spokesperson.
So, thank you.
Yes, but that's not a campaign question. That's the president of the United States saying that
It's a campaign
state
question
broke
on
a
ballot
law.
initiatives that you have and absentee ballots. So I would
No,
refer you to the
the
campaign
president
on that
is the
front, and I
head
would
law
note to you
enforcement
that
officer. He
many of
says
those
so
ballots,
himself.
that are submitted
This is a law
via
enforcement
mail can be
issue.
fraudulent. I cited to you the bipartisan study. I can read it again. Maybe you weren't paying attention when I read it the first time, so I'll read it again.
What a bitch.
President Carter, a Democrat, not a Republican, and James Baker concluded that these ballots remained the largest source of potential voter fraud. So if you cast a ballot via mail and
Largest
you do
source
so
of
fraudulently, that would be an illegal
potential.
act. And I'd point you to that. And for further, I'd point you to my former employer, which is the Trump campaign.
Is the president
Any
concerned
other
about fraud in
questions?
Georgia?
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you, Kaylee. Two questions, if I may. Firstly, on airports. The TSA is reportedly considering setting up temperature checks at airports. Given the numbers of people who can be asymptomatic or sick without a fever, do you think that's sufficient? And why wasn't more done to have screening at airports sooner, particularly in light of the House oversight investigation that called screening from international hotspots in March limited and stagnant?
So the president is working with TSA, he's working with airlines. We want to ensure that our TSA employees are safe, that those who are traveling are safe, and he has had those conversations, and we are keeping people safe at the TSA and the passengers as well.
Over 500 TSA employees have become sick, and 6 are dead. So again, do you think this has been enough action and soon enough?
We've taken action. We're working with the TSA. We're keeping America's essential workers safe, and we are
You're not,
praying
though.
for all
6
of
are
those
dead.
who have been affected by coronavirus.
You know, on another front, I wanted to ask about the president's son and business partner, Eric Trump. He recently said of coronavirus that, quote, the Democrats are trying to milk this and predicted it will, quote, magically all of a sudden go away and disappear, and everyone will be able to reopen after the election in November. Do you think Eric Trump's comments are accurate and also appropriate?
I think we all hope coronavirus goes away, and I think as we continue to take the president and his family out of context, we should endeavor to quote them accuracy, and I think we should all hope that the coronavirus goes.
Was inaccurate?
We should all hope that the coronavirus goes away. Yes.
Well,
Is there
he's
a
not
timeline
hoping
for
that.
when UK and European Union citizens and visitors are allowed to come back into the United States? And will all European countries be included, or could it be a case-by-case basis?
So we don't have a timeline on that just yet. I can tell you the president's preeminent concern is keeping Americans safe. His travel restrictions have saved lives, as Dr. Fauci and others have noted. So we don't have an announcement as to when we'll be rolling those back, but his priority. His number one concern is America first and the health and well-being of the nation first. Yes.
Thanks, Kaylee.
It's two priorities.
A spokesman for Governor Whitmer said that
And
she
one
was
doesn't mean
planning to meet
anything.
with the president wasn't given an invitation tomorrow. I was wondering if there's a reason why
That
wouldn't
Purple
be
really
Whitmer-
makes her eyes
Whitmer
pop.
said-
in Michigan wasn't extended an invitation to the president's appearance in Michigan tomorrow.
Oh my God, she could be
and I
my
was wondering
sister.
If there's a reason why he wasn't going to meet with her like other governors.
I don't think there was a particular reason. It didn't come up, but
Laura?
while on that note, I would point to Governor Whitmer. It sounds like she's curious about an invitation, but she should be quite happy that thanks to this federal government, FEMA obligated more than $216.2 million to Michigan, $8.6 million N95 respirators, 740,000 18 surgical masks, 311,571 face shields. I should round these up or we'll be here all day. 760,000 gloves, 700 ventilators. The president has done quite a bit for Michigan, and her concern's an invitation, but she should be thanking the president for all
And
the
he's really
supplies
sorry
that he's
about all the
delivered to
dead in
state.
Michigan.
Yes.
Yes, Kaylee,
Can we
the
round
president
those numbers
has
up?
made clear that he's concerned about liability issues as companies reopen now. Is the White House engaged with Republican senators about this issue? And would the president sign another bill, another COVID bill, without liability being addressed in that?
So I won't lay out the president's conditions or lack thereof for any upcoming
Because I'm not like his
legislation. He has
spokesperson or
mentioned
anything,
that
so
it's something
knock
that
it
needs
off,
to be looked
guys.
at closely and is
5,000
looking at
dead in
closely,
Michigan.
and he is
You can round that
discussing
up
with
to
members of the Hill
6,000.
about that. But he has made clear in terms of the phase 4 that he wants to be slow as we approach a phase 4 and not rush forward with spending
Right, Sherry?
trillions more dollars of taxpayer money. We've done a lot so far, and he'll look at doing more in the future. And liability is definitely something that he's concerned about and working on.
Yeah, but that's not the.
Right back there.
Oh, one more on G7. Do you think that it would be appropriate to hold a G7 summit in the U.S. while ordinary citizens are still not allowed to travel freely, for example, from Europe?
Yeah, the president
Yes.
wants us to start reopening. Travel restrictions are something that, he wants to make sure American lives are protected before those are lifted. But that being said, I do think it's entirely appropriate, so does the president, to have
With
a
that
G7
being said,
here.
he's blocked all
America's
immigration
reopening,
into the
world's
United States
reopening.
for the next.
And what a show of strength and optimism to have all of the leaders of these countries come together at the White House and pursue business
Where two
as
people have
usual
tested
as
positive
we
in the
move
last week.
forward through this pandemic.
If I'm a world leader, I'm like,
Is there
no,
anyone I haven't
thank
gotten
you.
to?
Only if you wear a mask.
Okay, so we'll do a few more. Yeah, I had a brief answer to your question. So you go ahead.
Hey, Kaylee, Susan Rice wrote an op-ed yesterday in the New York Times that said that President Trump has kowtowed to President Xi, and also has said that called his response to the coronavirus
Who is this guy?
deadly, classified as a deadly mishandling. What's the White House's response to that?
So you said that came from Susan Rice, was it? Okay, so first
Okay,
I
hold
would
on, let me look
want
through
to
this
take a moment to
binder.
address the president's response because the president has had an extraordinary and early response to the coronavirus. I would note Dr. Birx, the early work of President Trump, both with travel restrictions and quarantine, has bought us the time and space necessary to have this task force be very effective. Dr. Fauci
And kill
saying that
92,000
the president's
people.
response has been impressive. You can't imagine
That
under
is
any
impressive,
circumstance
actually.
that anyone
I mean-
could be doing anything more. I can go through the actions. There's a detailed timeline out there of January 6th, Wuhan issuing a travel notice issued on Wuhan when there were 0 cases in the United States. The 17th,
January 6th?
0 reported U.S. cases, and there were public health entry screenings at major U.S. airports. Of course, the infamous travel restrictions that were called xenophobic by Democrats on January 31st. A lot of action in February on
February
developing
2nd.
a test. And
A
making
lot
sure
of
we were
action.
moving
We're just
forward
going to
as
skip
speedily
over
as
a
possible
lot of action
on that.
with developing a
Keep in
faulty
mind, I wanna
test.
say at February,
that-
Pelosi was saying, "Come to Chinatown; it's very safe." But the president had already
where there were
taken
no tests
very early
because
action. And I know you
we
brought up
screwed that
Susan
up.
Rice in that context, but I'm going to bring her up in another context that's equally as newsworthy, and that is the email that was declassified
Yes.
from Susan Rice on Inauguration Day, which is
Good.
so peculiar. It set the scene. It's Inauguration Day. You're moving out of the White House. This is the most powerful building on planet Earth.
Is
Susan
it?
Rice is moving out,
Full of
reflecting on her
COVID?
time here, and what is
Yeah.
she doing? She's not packing her boxes. She's not being nostalgic
Because
about her
White
time in the
House-
White House. What
White
she's
House
doing is writing
counsel
an
told
email
her to do
where
it
3 times she
because
writes that
she was
President
directed to
Obama
do that.
emphasized to conduct the investigation into Michael Flynn by the book, by the book, by the book. She writes it 3 times.
by the book.
As Shakespeare said, "Thou doth protest too much, Susan Rice." He didn't have
Shakespeare,
the Susan Rice part in there, but I'll add that in.
Methinks?
Two,
Okay.
She was asked specifically about the unmasking of Michael Flynn after she discussed it
And it's the
on
Queen,
January 5th in the Oval Office
not
with
thou.
Obama. After she wrote this email to herself on Inauguration Day, she was asked by a good journalist, Judy Woodruff,
This is unburnable.
about this email, and about the unmasking of Michael Flynn, not the email, but the unmasking.
Yeah.
She was asked specifically about Nunes's claim specifically. So let me clarify, it was Nunes's claim.
Mhm.
And she said, I know nothing about this, so it was a lie. And then
No, it
Susan
was not.
Rice, since no one brought it up to me, I will bring it up to you. Her attorney said that this was the first opportunity 3 weeks after this Oval Office meeting that she had to write this email memorializing her Oval Office meeting with Barack Obama discussing Michael Flynn.
Yeah,
It was
people
her
in the
first
White House used to have
opportunity,
stuff
she
to
said.
do.
Interesting, because she had an opportunity in those 3 weeks on January 10th to do a passing of the baton event with none other than Michael Flynn, where she praised him, wished him success, and talked about the great transition into the White House. And
Yeah,
then on
that was
January
before
12th, she was able to participate
lied
in
to
the
the
story that
FBI.
published on that date in the lifestyle section of the Washington Post. So she never had time to write this email until Inauguration Day as she's rushing out the door, when in fact she had an opportunity to do all of those things.
So you wanted her to
I'll
skip
leave that
the
with you.
handing,
Thank you for bringing
passing
up
of the
Susan
baton.
Rice, not in the context that I wished, but for allowing me to share that with you.
What context did she wish Susan Rice to be brought up in? Okay. Methinks you're right. It was Kevin McCarthy a couple of weeks ago who used that quote. What did he say? The lady death protests too much. Methink. I'm sure someone wrote that for him and it just autocorrected doth to death because, modern English, but he actually read talking about Nancy Pelosi. The lady death protests too much. All right. Okay. I have new credits for you guys, but it's not in the system yet. But we'll get those done. If you want to support me doing this and other stuff like it, then hey, go to kevinleefather.com. Here it comes, kevinleefather.com. And you can become a patron there, like many of these fine people that I see here. Hi, Denise. Wearing the crucifix, you're protected by the blood of Christ. Speaking of which, the CDC just released those guidelines, many of which has already been released. But anyway, one of the things they didn't release is guidelines for places of worship, because what they discovered is that there was one place of worship where the pastor and his wife, two people, infected 38% of the people in attendance. And I think 92 people attended. Somewhere in the 90s, don't quote me on this, I'm just remembering numbers in my head. 38% of them got infected. 15 more people in the community got infected because of that church service. And so far, 3 people have died. So I don't know if this was not a Jesus church or they had no Jesus blood in this church. I know there's all kinds of different denominations. Right, Barbara. I haven't finished. I've been kind of lazy in terms that I was, busy passing the baton to Michael Flynn, and I haven't had time to sit down and work on the song. But that's on the agenda. Different things keep popping up every day. There's things I'd love to tell you guys about, but I can't tell you about yet. But one thing that happened is Kevin Lee daughter, if you remember a while ago, she got a test, COVID-19 test, and then Kevin Lee's son got it the next day. And between Kevin Lee daughter's results, which were negative, and Kevin Lee's son's, the FDA shut the testing down. So we still haven't been able to get, and this is May 10th that he took the results, or took the test, we still haven't been able to get Kevin Lee's son's results. So thanks, FDA and Operation Warp Slime. Actually, there is a rush, Barbara, because this whole thing's, we're going to have a vaccine within the next 2 or 3 days. Everything's going to be obsolete. So anyway, Kevin Lee daughter has surgery coming up. Nothing major, nothing to worry about. And she can't take the surgery unless she takes a COVID test. Now, we've already taken the test, okay? And when we got the results, we just went online, got the results, and I just texted her, and I was like, hey, you're no COVID for you, right? I didn't take a screenshot of the results. Now that the FDA has stopped the program, and won't let anybody release results, she can't get the results of the test. So now she's probably going to have to go take another test, which, because things are taking up to 5 days for the test now, we might not know the results by the time her surgery is scheduled for, and we might not be able to get the surgery because we have to switch from one state to the other in terms of healthcare insurance because America. It's not an essential surgery, so it's not that big of a deal. But on the other hand, she got the test, she got the results. I didn't take a screenshot of the result like an idiot. You know how you always take a screenshot of your medical results because you know they're going to be gone the next day. I'm not a good father. I mean, that's all it comes down to. Yeah, that's true. Jesus, all I need is a crucifix. What am I thinking? Why is she even going into surgery? I'm just going to buy her a crucifix and that's going to be that. Taken care of. Go ahead and eat all the gluten you want, honey. Okay, well, that's it for this. I don't know what else is coming up today. Trump is meeting with governor later. There may be something after that, but that's about 4 p.m. Pacific time. Usually, if it's later in the evening, he just goes right to his cheeseburgers and doesn't do anything. But he might, you know. He's kind of he likes the spotlight. And I know the reporters are trying, but I would love it if they said, what is illegal? Well, the president, you know, that's a campaign, and he is the head of law enforcement in the country. What was illegal about the Secretary of State in Michigan and Nevada? By the way, Nevada is a Republican Secretary of State, and Trump criticized her this morning and threatened to withhold money of some sort. And we all remember the last time Trump withheld congressionally appropriated funds, impeachment, which of course changed nothing. Okay, it will work out. We're working on it. While I was broadcasting, the lab called, but I thought, you know what? You guys are more important than the lab right now. Shout out to Kathleen Perkins, Rich Mack, Daniel Rock for contributing directly to me on PayPal. If you want to do that, paypal.me/KevinLeeDad, not father. So paypal.me/KevinLeeDad. Otherwise, just go to kevinleefather.com and you can become a patron. And then you get your name in some really spiffy credits like this.